What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to
Beginning
it.
sport as such in the Soviet Union was popular and supported by the state, because a physically healthy person is an able worker and an excellent builder of communism. And since motorization on 1/6 of the land at that time was gaining momentum, the paths of sportsmen and motorists crossed. To be more precise, automobile enthusiasts began to race almost standard Moskvich and, much less often, Pobedas of those years. Competitions were held on circular tracks with asphalt and dirt surface, and the special attractiveness of the races was given by the fact that athletes did not just pass the distance for time and speed, and directly competed with each other for prizes, which often ended with crumpled fenders, broken windows, and headlights, and even flying off the road with subsequent overturns. A little digression. The 50s are considered to be the golden age of rallying in the world, because during this period the International Automobile Federation, FIA, launched the European Rally Championship, in which theoretically Soviet athletes could take part. That is why the home state also paid attention to the semi-official competition of enthusiasts, because the sporting success of Soviet cars on the world stage could add a lot of points in the eyes of potential Western buyers. And since that was the case, representatives of various sports societies found out in combat conditions who could drive better and faster. However, much depended on the material base of the company that prepared the car, because one could not go far on enthusiasm alone. At that time, most people had minimal experience. Sportsmen by trial and error only took their first steps in motor racing, and this activity in the Union did not promise much material profit or fame at that time. Nevertheless, high-speed driving behind the wheel of an almost mass-produced car attracted young people who lived by the principle of faster, higher, stronger. We do not ionize or romanticize that time, but people lived that way. Moreover, in the second half of the 50s, Khrushchev's thaw, the Iron Curtain for our sportsmen was lifted a bit, allowing them to travel abroad to participate in rally competitions. This allowed them to show themselves, i.e. to demonstrate the capabilities of Soviet cars and the potential of the drivers, and see others, facing foreigners in foreign cars, as they call it, in battle, albeit often unequal. The starting point of domestic rally as a sport is considered to be October 15, 1956, the day when the Central Automobile Club became a member of the International Automobile Federation, FIA, and the first official race, which started with over 100 crews, was held in May 1957 in Ticino. Rally of 1,000 Lakes, Raid of Poland, Monte Carlo, and Acropolis, Tours of Europe and Friendship Cups. One can long list all those competitions, in which later representatives of socialist and capitalist countries took part. In addition to the confrontation between cars and people, there was even an unspoken battle of ideologies and economic systems, because the training of the athlete and the car depended directly on the material capabilities of the country he represented, and the technique itself reflected the level of technology to which the automotive industry was able to pull up. 21st and 407th under the control of Soviet athletes even repeatedly took part in the prestigious Monte Carlo rally, but in 1964 their results were not counted, and a year later they could not even reach the finish line. The cars simply lacked power, and because they tried to force them in every way, reliability suffered as well. Accidents also happened. A Moskvich was wrecked on the road at the Monte Carlo rally, and a Volga was wrecked at the Greek Acropolis rally. Fortunately, there were no casualties. My dear Moskviches, according to the results of the frankly failed 50s, they came to the right conclusions. In the 60s, the bet was made almost without alternatives on Moskvich, which by that time was already well known and popular abroad. Zaporozhets was too weak in every sense, and the party nomenclatura Volga on the contrary, it proved to be too heavy for this sport, where cars often did not so much drive as fly low. No wonder that the factory team of MZMA, later AZLK, became the strongest in the country and served as a base for the formation of the USSR National Rally Team. A little later, Izhevsk athletes joined it on almost the same cars, but with the IZH emblem on the grille. The success of the 412 on rally tracks was explained simply. Under the hood it had a flaming engine with the upper location of the camshaft, hemispherical combustion chamber and an unusual arrangement of valves, at an angle to each other. From 1.5 litres of working volume even in the standard version, the designers managed to remove 75 horsepower. The figure remained quite decent for an 8-valve engine of this volume up to the end of the 80s. Even with minimal modifications, the motor produced 80 to 85 horsepower, and after some intervention, all 120 to 150 horsepower. At the same time, Moskvich remained quite reliable car, which would be enough not only for a short dop, several tens of kilometers, of SU, but also for a longer test of speed and road. And soon such a test fell to the share of Moscow and Izhevsk sedans and station wagons. In 1968, the Soviet drivers took part in the most difficult rally marathon London, Sydney, with the length of 16,000 kilometers. Several continents, the most difficult road conditions, powerful rivals, driven by experienced drivers with world-famous names, everything seemed to work against the Soviet Union team, competing on modest Moskviches. However, all 412 managed to reach the finish line, thanks to which our drivers managed to rise to 4th place in the team standings, although the absolute results were much more modest. Due to the peculiarities of the regulations in this marathon, our almost production cars competed with multi-litre Fords and BMWs, which had much more powerful 6- and even 8-cylinder engines under their hoods. Moskvich was just a little pumped up. The car was fitted with a safety cage, large fog lights, an additional gas tank, a Kanguriatnik and engine protection. 2 years later, the Soviet team tried to repeat the success, taking part in the no less difficult marathon London, Mexico City, with a length of 26,000 kilometers. In the team standings they managed to rise one more step, taking the 3rd place, and in the absolute Soviet rallyists were able to climb to the 12th position, and only 23 out of 96 cars were able to reach the finish line. The Muscovites were also not without losses, but 3 out of 5 crews reached Mexico City. The success of the Muscovites in various competitions was explained by Baltic origin, despite jokes and stereotypes about the inhabitants of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Some of the most promising drivers at that time were young Baltic drivers, Stasys Brundza, who was not too well known at that time, and the Gordorskas brothers, Arvidas and Kęstutis. By the will of fate, they found themselves driving Moskvichi, which allowed the Soviet team to take a swing at the podium. Even after the Jiguli took to the roads of the country, and later, to the rally dopes, the Moskviches continued to perform well on international rallies. For example, in 1971 at the Trans-European Rally Tour d'Europe, Moskvich for 12 took the 3rd place, and at the Golden Sands in Bulgaria. In the same year, 4, 6, and 7 places in the absolute standings, missing such cars as BMW 2002 and Renault Alpine. A year later the rivals from the socialist camp moved to Porsche 911 and Renault Gordini, but the Soviet racers still managed to take 8, 10, and 11 places respectively. And in 1972 Stasys Brundza managed to take bronze on the 412. East took the 3rd place in the absolute. Interestingly, the 2nd step of the podium was taken not by anyone, but by Walter Röhrl himself in a Ford Capri RS. And at the All-Union Championships Moskvich really shone, having won 12.5 victories. Rally Tour of Europe 74 brought another gold to the Moscow car. The 1st place was taken by the same Stasys Brundza. Racing Rook, the 1st model Jiguli, the Soviet novelty, debuted at the 1971 Tour d'Europe, which was held for the first time on the territory of the USSR, and managed to beat our Moskvich, taking 2nd place in the absolute and 1st place in the class, which was an unthinkable achievement for debutantes. 2 years later, our athletes in Jiguli managed to take 2 cups at once, gold and silver, in the team competition, and in 1974, the Soviet crew on the 1 was able to take 4th place. A few words about what VAZ 2101 in the performance of Tour d'Europe 1971 differed from the standard one. So, it was Weber carburetors, Koni shock absorbers, Pirelli tires, navigational instruments, safety frame, seats, and belts, additional Tsebia headlights, 2nd gas tank. Brundza, who had already received worldwide recognition by that time, switched from Moskvich to Jiguli, having taken part in the Finnish Rally 1000 Lakes on the newest model of VAZ tricycle, the 3-horse under his control the novelty was able to take the 1st place in its Class A2, up to 1,600 cubes, and in 1976 Stasys takes 6th place in the Greek Rally Acropolis. Fun fact, working as test drivers in Togliatti, amateur athletes performed on AZLK 412. However, a little later they were allocated a few units, although at that time the novelty was still a dark horse in terms of sport. Brunzer installed on VAZ 21011 a motor from the 6 with a volume of 1.6 litres alas, by this time the lag of the Soviet technique, albeit additionally prepared, from significantly more powerful foreign cars became more and more obvious. Therefore, our cars were destined to the fate of statisticians, which were located in the standings from 20 to 30 lines in the absolute standings. It was also explained by the fact that over the past decade the rally format itself has changed significantly. If once rallies were more appropriately called marathon raids, then in the mid-70s the championships moved to closed tracks, where reliability was no longer at the top of the list. Relatively short high-speed special stages required from the car high engine power, which Soviet rally cars could not boast in principle. Hurricane dynamics, refined controllability, high maximum. All this is not about our Jigguli and Moskvich, at least, if we compare them with those cars on which the winners of the World Rally performed. Fading the 80s finally put all the dots on the i's. After all, the world was dominated by front-wheel drive, not only on city streets but also on rally tracks, except, of course, when all wheels were driven. It became obvious that the days of the classic layout in big sport, or at least in rally, are numbered. From time to time ZA Rulam magazine informed its readers about new products and events in the world of rallying, even Stasys Brunzer, who created a 160 horsepower Lada VFTS on the basis of the fifth model of Jigguli Lada VFTS, which received homologation in Class B, eventually switched to front-wheel drive, although in the same 1984 Valosuts and Tumas Putmaker were able to finish first on the Rally Baltica, held as part of the Cup of Friendship of Socialist Countries. Two alternative models were created in the laboratory of sports racing models of VAZ, Lada VAZ 2105 LSGA 2000 and Lada LSGA 1800 SR, which differed by unusual technique, front suspension of McPherson type and increased engine volume up to 1.7 to 1.8 litres. As soon as 8 became serial, VAZ started its adaptation for rally. In 1985, a modification Lada VAZ 2108 Rally was created. Its distinctive feature was the central engine layout, and the engine drove not the front, but the rear wheels. The truck received the Index 29081 and taking into account the developed engine power, 150 to 160 horsepower, it potentially looked quite formidable. And in all-wheel drive version, 29084, the car received even more confident hitch, but it turned out that it was not enough power, because the monsters of Group B had twice as many horses as the charged Sputnik. At the same time, Stasys Brunzer was experimenting with a new platform, turning the front-wheel drive VAZ 2108 into a new one VAZ 2108, with a 64 horsepower engine into something called EVA. The body of this car resembles the outline of an 8, but the technique. Hold on tight. Under the roof of the experimental Vilnius automobile plant, Brunzer has made a car, the engine of which was placed in the rear within the wheelbase. The engine volume increased to 1.9 litres, and the power reached a mind-boggling 300 HP. Alas, after the FIA banned Group B, not only Togliatti prototypes 29081-29084, but also Baltic EVA remained out of business. But the international homologation for the 5 VFTS was valid until 1991, and later these cars, and their clones, took part in various competitions thanks to the national homologations. Remembering the glorious pages of the Soviet rally, we cannot fail to mention Niva, which has repeatedly taken part in the prestigious Rally Raid Paris, Dakar, and even took second place in 1982 in the Absolute, crew Jean-Claude Briavone and André Delia. However, the success of the team of French importer Lada Park headed by Jean-Jacques Park has no special relation to our story, because this car, as well as the prototype Lada Samara T3, were prepared outside the USSR and technically had not much in common with the sources. For example, the alleged 8 had native and untouched headlights and lights, door locks, windshield, and emblem. Izhevsk and Moscow automobile plants at this time made several attempts to enter the river for the second time, but with newer models IZH2126 and AZLK2141. Alas, both the rear-wheel drive Orbiter ODA and the front-wheel drive 41st, in fact, turned out to be stillborn for the sport. In addition, the time of Soviet cars in rally on the world arena irrevocably gone by the end of the 80s. Well, the The collapse of the Union put a fat economic point, because beggars can't have millionaires' hobby. In conclusion, the journey of rallying in the USSR is a testament to the resilience and determination of those who dared to push boundaries. From its humble beginnings, marked by both failures and successes, to its eventual decline, the sport encapsulated the spirit of innovation and competition in a rapidly changing society. The stories of triumph and setbacks remind us that progress often comes through perseverance and learning from our mistakes. As we reflect on this fascinating chapter in automotive history, we can appreciate how rallying not only shaped the landscape of motorsport in the USSR but also left a lasting legacy that continues to inspire enthusiasts around the world today.